Is it not conceivable that in the not too distant future, we will have fossil fuels combustion without emissions? And doesn't that change everything?
Let me, I mean, first of all, lots of agreement again. And I think the key is that some of these significant funds should be reinvested into R&D and new technology options. And, you know, I'll highlight a few and there'll be some more of those. I think what we've got to keep doing is keep coming back to what the issue is. And the issue is CO2 in the atmosphere for now. There are other issues, but that's the big issue we have to get to. If you wanted to have the biggest impact on CO2, then work on fossil fuel quality now. You know, we could have had vehicles that do 2 and 3 times the miles they do on this continent 25 years ago. And we haven't had them. In the rest of the different parts of the world, they use those. Here, we, for whatever reason, didn't adopt those policies. Partly culture and practice, partly regulation. So, lots of work on fuel quality. Just a sort of a beacon of hope, if you like, that. Michael talked about one of the challenges for corporations, which is, you know, we look at R&D and we're investing somebody else's money for them. So we're looking at how we can link those things back. And the old model has been to protect technology. Intellectual property is protected. We have a whole industry which works on how you define it and protect it. Given that we believed it was actually in the industry's benefit to have some breakthroughs, particularly on the environmental file, particularly on CO2, but also on water treatment and quality, we got the industry to pull their technology. We had a square up at the beginning which recognized they'd put significantly different amounts of money. And instead of Suncor having a project and Exxon having a project and Shell having a project and Canadian Natural having a project, we pool those resources and we develop those technologies together around the environment. Because you get some lines which are difficult to draw between what's environment and what's business. But we found the areas we could work on to start with, and it's a shockingly successful exercise. So we've now got over $1.25 billion worth spent on those projects. I think, Stephen, we have you know, maybe just under 1,000 different pieces of work which are being done. So you can actually do things in the public interest at a greater speed. And what we said is, what that will do is help the industry in Canada differentiate against the rest of the world. It will help us raise the whole thing up, because most of that is around the challenges around oil sands.
So the intellectual property is shared?
The intellectual property is shared, and we don't differentiate.
So that's not the normal way of doing things.
Gosh, that was tough. I mean, can you imagine one of the greatest owners in the world of intellectual property is Exxon. They've got 200 years of developing projects, and it was incredibly difficult for them to do it. They're full members of it. So around the environment, on these issues, with some protection that we can't just go and market it and use it for others, we share it in the industry. Safety is easy. Environment is proven not to be easy. And then we start to get into these other areas. The other challenge, and I'll pick out a few areas, but I'm as interested in the process, is we're not particularly good at a country of taking technology and turning it into something useful. And you really need the alignment of, real classic think tanks, universities, almost bench top type science being worked, and then industry helping direct that and utilize it. And we started to build some of those, called a Clean Tech Hub, which is actually based out of Vancouver, but we use across Canada. That's also, and what we tried to do is bring. We brought up a high-flying guy from Silicon Valley, because they've got more experience in that field, and they're making some real progress on some real projects. So that's quite interesting. So those processes. So I would say, from industry point of view, do it on fuel quality and some of the science of what we're doing. And then right back to the question, it depends how you do the science. Yes, we believe. So we now got the oil sands industry, which was in the sort of 110, 120% of conventional crude oil range, down to equal now. The plant we've just built up in north of Fort McMurray is equal to the carbon footprint of a conventional barrel of fuel. So it's enabled us now to stop differentiating and say it's a fossil fuel thing, not just a Canadian or an oil sands thing. Some of those technologies are quite exciting. So it's what you're saying, who would have believed that we could, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, we didn't believe we could get this tight oil and gas extracted the way we can. We've seen a 30% reduction in the energy consumption per barrel that we have in our business over a relatively short period. Those types of gains are there to be had. And I think it's that ensures you have a part to play in the mix of fuels in the long run. But we've got to invest that money. So it's an important policy issue to recycle that money. And then it depends how you draw your lines. I mean, the guys would say, yes, they can get to zero carbon, but you get into a cycle. And, carbon is a natural cycle. I mean, plants take CO2 in and use it as their feed.